Lesson 14, we're going to use the ratio tables, the equations, and even take a look at some double number line diagrams to move our thinking on to plotting points on the coordinate plane. This is really an activity for groups in class, but I'm going to show you a little bit about it here so that in case you missed class, you can still complete the activity on your own. Callie's traveling by train with her soccer team from Yonkers, New York to Morgantown, West Virginia for a tournament. The distance between Yonkers and Morgantown is 400 miles. The total trip will take 8 hours. The train schedule is provided below. Please notice the first schedule is for leaving Yonkers and traveling to Morgantown, and the second table is from leaving Morgantown and traveling back to Yonkers. We're asked to create a table to show the time it will take Kelly and her team to travel from Yonkers to each town listed in the schedule, assuming that the ratio of the amount of time traveled to the distance traveled is the same for each city. Then we're going to extend the table to include the cumulative time it will take to reach each destination on the ride home. Cumulative means the running total. And so when we complete this, you'll see that it keeps on increasing. First of all, in 2 hours, it would go 100 miles. Because remember, the total trip is going to take 8 hours. They told us that in the original problem. Total trip will take 8 hours, and the trip is 400 miles. So that means if we divide 400 by 8, we'll find that it is 50 miles per hour. That's where we get the 2 hours and 100 miles. So continuing on, when they have traveled 4 hours, they should have traveled 200 miles. Remember, 50 miles an hour, so 50, 100, 150, 200. And you'll notice that it's a running total. We're not just showing 2 hours at a time. If they travel 6 hours, they will have traveled 300 miles. And when they have traveled 8 hours, they will have traveled 400 miles. And they will be at their destination in West Virginia. But of course, they actually have to get home after that as well. So if they travel 10 hours, that's 500 miles. 12 hours would be 600 miles. 14 hours would be 700 miles. And 16 hours would be 800 miles. And they would be home. That information could also be put on a double number line. And basically with the double number line, we would start at 0. So this would be our 0 mark for both number lines. The top number line, we will graph the number of hours. And on the bottom number line, we will put the number of miles. So we start at 0. We are doing ours by 2s. So we'd have 2 and then 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and then finally our full 16 hours. That is for the top number line. Then on the bottom number line, we're going to put the miles. And of course, we would start at 0. And just like we did in our other table, for every 2 hours, we would increase 100. Continuing in the same pattern. And at the end, we would be at 800 miles. So a double number line diagram is simply showing you those two values in your ratio on the same number line continuum. And then you can answer the questions based on the number line diagram or based on your table. Either one is fine. In example 1, they're talking about dinner service starting once the train is 250 miles away from Yonkers. And what is the minimum time the team will have to wait before they can have their meal? If we look back at the table, and we will recreate the table here in this section of your activity, we're going to put that information back in there. For example, 2 hours, 100 miles. And so the ordered pair that we would plot on the graph is going to be 2 for the x value, 100 for the y value. This means 2 across, 100 up. Same thing will be true for the 4-mile coordinates. So your x value across will be 4, your y value will be 200. I'm not going to complete the entire table for you. However, I do want to go down into your graph and show what you should do on your graph. Remember, our first value, the hours, is what you're going to put across the bottom or your x-axis across. So you'll need to label hours underneath here, and you will need to label the intervals on your graph itself. So for instance, you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and continuing on. Your y-axis, which is the vertical axis going up and down, that needs to be miles. And likewise, you need to label these lines by 50s or by 100s, but you need to label them so that you can graph correctly. Once you have labeled your graph, then you're going to go back in the ordered pairs, and you're going to go this, for example, over 2, up to 100, and plot your point. You do not draw lines over 2 and up. You simply count over, count up, and then put a dot. Do that with all of your values, and then take a ruler and connect your line. I promise you it will be a line if you do it correctly. Continue on with the problem set, reading carefully and following the directions exactly the way you're asked.